Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah. This podcast, we'll take a look at the first few games the Lakers have played since the passing of Kobe Bryant. We'll break down the All-Star reserves and see who got snubbed. We'll review some of the bigger games over the last few days that I have predictions for, so we'll see how I did on those. And we'll talk trade rumors and injuries before ending the show with who's hot and who's not. So let's just dive in. The Lakers' first game since Kobe Bryant passed away, January 26, 2020, Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and 7 others died in a helicopter crash. Absolutely tragic. Kind of shook the whole NBA basketball world and the world as a whole. And the Lakers' first scheduled game, they postponed it. It was supposed to be against the Clippers. But they finally took the floor against the Blazers this past Friday. Players came out in Kobe Bryant jerseys, either wearing the number 8 Kobe Bryant jersey or the number 24, as well as the whole crowd. The Lakers organization set up at Staples Center to have fans have a shirt of the Kobe Bryant jerseys, donning the 24, the 8 around the whole crowd. So I think that's really cool. The whole pregame ceremony, basically, in loving memory of Kobe Bryant, was very emotional. It included an amazing performance by Usher, who, was very close to Kobe Bryant as well. There's a picture of him sitting in the stands before anyone else had arrived. Kind of just, you could tell he was emotional, and he sang "Amazing Grace," and it was very heartfelt. And then there's a great tribute video for Kobe Bryant that had the fans kind of applauding through tears, and then LeBron was the one who closed out the opening ceremony. Basically, he kind of had a paper in his hand, and he was saying how the Lakers organization wanted him to stick to the paper for whatever reason, and he crumpled up and threw it. He said that he should go straight from the heart, and he delivered a great speech about his relationship with Kobe Bryant, what he meant to him. And it was just a good start for the game. It was a very emotional time, and he finished it with, in the words of Kobe Bryant, "Mamba out," but in the words of us, "Not forgotten. Live on, brother." And I thought that was really cool that the Lakers put on such a great opening ceremony for him. They also left 2 open seats, one with the actual Kobe jersey, and one with Gianna's jersey as well, with flowers on top of it. So that was a nice touch as well. So there's just a lot of emotions going around. And then for that kind of pregame ceremony to then have to play a game, I feel like is extremely tough to do, especially since, they're still grieving. They're still dealing with this death. And it's different for them because, Kobe Bryant spent 20 years at this organization. He meant everything to the city of LA. And so I can't imagine how they went through all of that and then played this game. But then during the announcements of the players, one last nod to Kobe Bryant. It was really cool. Every single player that checked in was announced as a 6'6" player out of Lower Marion High School, and that's where Kobe Bryant played. And I thought that was really cool as well. Other news surrounding Kobe: LeBron got a Kobe tat with a mamba snake, on either side of its head, it had the number 8 and the number 24, with flowers around it, and underneath it said "Mamba for life." AD also got a tattoo for Mamba. And then all kinds of other support from around the world, from the Super Bowl that just happened. Both teams stood on the 24-yard line, had a moment of silence. And around the world, soccer games as well, they had moments of silence as well. And so, obviously, this is still very fresh. There's still a lot of love. And it'll be interesting to see, how long, this grieving process takes, and, how much they're really going to continue to pay respects to him as well. But like I said, they had to get the game going on after all that emotion that they built up. This game was very close with the lead changing 17 times and the game being tied 15 times. So it was very back and forth. Anthony Davis scored half of the Lakers' points with 18 points in the first quarter, but they still trailed 38-36. Damian Lillard in that first quarter had 13 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists to pretty much set himself up for the game he was about to have. Spoiler alert, he played really well this game. Lakers ended up having the halftime lead 62-60. But then in the third, Damian Lillard caught fire again. He's been absolutely crazy lately, playing out of his mind. In the third quarter alone, he scored 23 points and hit 6 3-pointers. So, man on fire. He ended up scoring 7 3-pointers total this game, taking him at the time to 43s in a 5-game span, and that was a new NBA record. So that just kind of shows you in perspective how well Damian Lillard had been playing. And with the crowd chanting Kobe in the fourth, the Lakers made a late push, but the Blazers held on and won this one 127-119. But Lillard, after the game, said, "I don't feel like anybody feels like we walked away as a winner tonight, given the circumstances." And I think that's a perfect way to sum it up, because this game had to be played, yes, because it's on the schedule, but I feel like it was just so much bigger than that, and it was never really about the competition. It was more about kind of just trying to play through it, move on, and play through the pain, basically. Like I said, after all those ceremonies and all that emotion, it's tough to try and lace up and compete at the highest level, and obviously still affecting the Lakers. Even though the Blazers are a great team, I feel like usually in better circumstances, the Lakers probably would have won this game. But yeah, Lillard was a man on fire, so who knows, honestly. He finished with 48 points, 9 rebounds, 10 assists. He almost got another triple-double after just having done so his previous game, his first ever career one, if you can believe that. So it would have been back-to-back triple-doubles. We won't be breaking it down, but as a side note, Damian Lillard also dropped 51 against the Jazz in a 124-107 win in their latest game. And the Jazz have not been playing very well, but the Blazers have been on fire, especially Damian Lillard. I mean, you've seen players hit hot streaks, but at this point, this is basically an inferno. He's crazy hot right now. He's the first player in NBA history to average 45 points per game and 10 assists per game in a 6-game span. He's been absolutely absurd, and I think it's been a long time coming for him to really establish himself as just one of the most dangerous players in this league. He's been floating around superstardom since he's been in the league. Excuse me. And he's really just hit this groove where he just knows how to make himself effective in the game, and he's on a really good high right now. Whiteside in this game, he added 30 points and 13 rebounds. And 30 points for Whiteside, it's a huge outing for him. McCollum had 19.6 rebounds and 5 assists. And on the other side of the ball, Anthony Davis had a monster performance. I mean, he really showed out for their first game for Kobe Bryant, and he scored 37 points, had 15 boards, 6 assists with 5 blocks. I mean, he was getting it done on both ends of the floor, so he really was carrying this Lakers team, played really well. LeBron almost had a triple-double, but I haven't really seen LeBron put out as many points as I would have expected from him throughout the season. He just hasn't been putting up big numbers. He did manage 22 points in this game, had 8 rebounds and 10 assists. But I think I would expect a little more from LeBron just in terms of points. And then Kyle Kuzma, he had a great game as well, 17 points, 15 rebounds. So this game, not necessarily the tribute in terms of the result that they wanted for Kobe. And losing this game meant that they were on a 2-game skid. So their next chance for redemption was against the Sacramento Kings, and they took that chance extremely well. In the first half, they had 26 assists. They had made 14 threes, shot 81.8% from the free throw line, 81 being Kobe's highest career point output, and then 0.8 being his first number. And then they scored 81 points in the first half. 81 points at halftime. That's the most Kobe Bryant ever scored in his career. Second highest output of scoring in NBA history. So for them to do that by halftime, I thought was really cool to see. That was also a season high for them at half. Kings shot 44% from the field and only managed 9 threes in comparison to the Lakers, who were just red hot in that first half. And after erupting in that first, they kind of chilled out a bit in the second, and they just coasted to a 129-113 win. Their 15th consecutive win on the road in terms of Western Conference matchups, and that's the longest streak in NBA history as well. So it's crazy how they've been as consistent as they are in the West. They're still in first place, 3.5 games up right now, 37-11 overall record, and to play that well on the road is a great sign for them. LeBron didn't shoot the ball that well in this game, but he did get a triple-double. He had 15 points, 10 rebounds, and 11 assists. AD with another good output. He had 21 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists. Avery Bradley added 19. KCP had 15. Rondo had 13 points and 8 assists. And then Caruso had 13 and Kuzma had 12. So just a lot of double-digit scoring outputs from many players on this Lakers team. And they just coasted to this win and played really well in this game. And they're going to want to, now that they're back on the winning side of things, finally won a game, post Kobe Bryant's passing, they can start to move on and continue to grieve, but really move on and start really getting back to their quest of getting back to a championship. Having 7 players in double figures to get them back on track is definitely a good sign for them. So, switching gears, it's official. The full all-star rosters have been announced. A few of them from the Lakers. I bet you can guess who. But who got the first honors and who got snubbed? We talk about that next.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about how the Los Angeles Lakers have played their first couple of games since the passing of Kobe Bryant. Their first game against the Clippers that was scheduled after he had passed, they postponed because they were still very much in the grieving process. It was way too soon for them to put on, a contest like that. Their first game against the Blazers didn't necessarily go how they wanted it to. The Blazers ended up beating them, but then they came back, beat the Kings, had scored 81 points at halftime, and were just playing phenomenal basketball. Kind of got back on the winning side of things, kind of got that one off their chest, and now they're going to make another push to continue being first in the West and another push to the championship they're on a quest for. Their All-Stars and Anthony Davis and LeBron James are among those who are on the full rosters that are out now. Just as a reminder, the West starters are James Harden, of course, Luka Doncic, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and Kawhi Leonard. For the East, the starters are Giannis, Trey, Kemba Walker, Pascal Siakam, and Joel Embiid. And then LeBron and Giannis were the two top vote getters. LeBron ended up edging out Luka Doncic, unfortunately, because I think it would have been really cool to see Doncic and Giannis be the two captains. But yeah, those are the starters. Those were the captains. But now the reserves are out as well. Starting with Adebayo, he's on the Heat. I think this is very well deserved. He has 16 points per game this season with 10.4 rebounds and 4.7 assists per game. It's his first time being an All-Star, but I think it's very well deserved. He's averaging career highs in all of those categories: points, assists, and rebounds. Plus, he's on this Heat team that's fourth right now in the East, but it's been floating around the top four all season. They've been in second, they've been in third, and they've been a lot more consistent than anyone probably would have imagined them being, because, I mean, their biggest star is Jimmy Butler. They do have good rookies in Tyler Hero and I'm missing the other guy. But, yeah, they're playing extremely well, and they're riding high right now. So for him to get a nod, and with the way he's been playing this season, been a double-double machine, it makes sense that he gets a nod for this team. Brandon Ingram also getting his first All-Star appearance now on a Pelicans team that is in 12th, but they have been moving up, especially now that Zion's back. They're getting a little more momentum. Brandon Ingram's been playing really well this season, probably up for most improved player of the year. He's averaging 25 points per game, 6.3 rebounds, and 4.3 assists per game. And he's been a main reason why, the Pelicans have been in any contest that they've been in. He's been their main guy on offense, and he's been really carrying the load. Chris Paul also made the All-Star team for the 10th time in his career. He's on a 7th place Thunder team right now, and he's probably the most clutch player in crunch time. We talked about it a couple podcasts ago. He's just been showing up late in games and being very efficient, very effective, and he's a big reason why this Thunder team is even competitive at all. A lot of people thought they were going to be a team to pick off their top players from. They'll be in the trade market and the trade deadline, trying to get rid of their players and build for the future. But somehow they're in 7th. They're an actual competitive team. And Chris Paul, kind of turning back the clock, playing some of his better basketball, is the main reason why. He's got 17.1 points per game, which isn't that impressive, really. 5 rebounds and 6.5 assists. But I think it goes beyond stats with Chris Paul. Just his impact and the way he controls the offense speaks largely to why the Thunder are as good as they are, and I think that's why he definitely deserves to be an All-Star in this game. Rudy Gobert is another player that's getting his first All-Star appearance. He's right now on a Utah Jazz team that's 4th in the West. They're on a 4-game skid all of a sudden after being on that 10-game winning streak, beating teams that are weaker than them for sure, under 500, but they are beating some bigger teams as well. And they were really just catching a groove, really finding that team chemistry and playing really well together. But they've kind of fallen off that a little bit. They're on a tough skid. He's been playing really well, though. I'm kind of surprised this is his first All-Star selection. He has 15.8 points per game this season with 14.5 boards, which is crazy numbers to be averaging a double-double like that, as prolifically as he is. Damian Lillard as well. He's another one making the reserves. This is a no-brainer, especially with the way he's been playing. We just talked about it. He's been a man on fire. Blazers are in 9th right now. They're a game and a half out of 8th place, and they're on a 4-game winning streak. So they're starting to play a little better, starting to play the way people expected them to start out the season. I mean, the Portland Trail Blazers should be a team that's in the playoff hunt in the Western Conference. They have the talent. They have the best backcourt in the NBA with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. Hassan Whiteside, great player. They're getting back Nurkic soon. Carmelo Anthony, who sat out against the Lakers because Kobe Bryant had told them, I'm going to come to this game. He just couldn't do that with the back in his mind, but he's on the team as well. So this Portland Trail Blazers team's got a lot of things going for them. And their main guy, Damian Lillard, gets the nod. He's been averaging 29 points per game, 4.3 rebounds, and 7.8 assists. So he's putting up some big numbers, playing really well this season. Donovan Mitchell gets his first All-Star appearance, 24.6 points per game, 4.2 rebounds, 4.3 assists. We just talked about how the Jazz are on that 4-game skid. But when they are enjoying a lot of success, he is definitely a catalyst and a big part of the reason why. And when he's not playing well, they don't play well. I mean, in one of their most recent losses, he only had 4 points, and we'll get to that later. So I'm going to have to give him some of my thoughts on that. Donovan Mitchell, if you're listening, you messed up in that game, but we'll get to that later. Jokic, he's on the Nuggets. This is his second time now making an All-Star team. The Nuggets team are in third place. He's averaging 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 6.6 a game this season. The Nuggets have had a lot of injuries as of late. Jamal Murray's been out. Paul Millsap's been out. Plumlee's been out. So they've been hurting. And Jokic just kind of kept them afloat in this one, kept them competitive. And he's needed to be as good as he's been. Otherwise, they definitely would have dropped a few spots. But they're still competitive and still in third place, holding off the Jazz right now. Luckily, because they're on a 4-game losing streak. Moving on, Ben Simmons is on the reserve team for the second time. He's averaging 16.6 points per game, 7.7 rebounds, and 8.3 assists per game. The Sixers are in sixth place right now. They're on a 2-game losing streak. They're probably one of the most inconsistent teams, in my opinion, in the NBA. A team that has been struggling with injuries. Joel Embiid's missed a few games here and there. But they just don't have enough offensively to be as consistent as they should be. Josh Richardson as well, he's injured. That's a big blow for their offense and their defense, really. So Sixers are struggling, but to see Ben Simmons going to All-Star team is definitely nice for them to see. I'm kind of surprised with those numbers that he made it in, but I guess because he's been the biggest bright spot for the Sixers, they gave him a nod. Sabonis, I think this is his first All-Star appearance as well. He's on a Pacers team that's in fifth right now. He's been playing really well. He's sixth in the league for rebounds per game. He has 18 points, 12.8 rebounds, and 4.6 on average this season. And he's been really a big reason why the Pacers have been as successful as they are. Him and TJ Warren playing really well this season. And without Victor Oladipo for most of it, now that he's back, that Pacers team could be really dangerous in the East. Fifth place right now, half a game above the Sixers. Jason Tatum gets his first nod for an All-Star selection. He's on a Celtics team who are third in the East right now, but could easily be in second. Have been floating around there all season long. He's averaging 21.5 points per game, 6.9 rebounds, and 2.8 assists. And he's been, he's had a great first rookie campaign, played really well in the playoffs. He's been kind of quiet in the beginning of the season, but now he's starting to pick it up. Been playing really well and really coming into his own as a player in this league. Jimmy Butler makes the All-Star team for his fifth time. The Heat, like I said, in fourth. He's been probably the biggest reason why they've been as successful as they are. He's been that star, really leading the way for his squad. He's got 20.2 points per game, 6.9 rebounds, and 6.4 assists. So he's getting it done all over the court. Plus just his competitive tenacity, I think, also helps that locker room a lot since they have a lot of young players. So that's definitely invaluable as well. Lowry makes it with the Raptors. They're in second right now. They're on a crazy win streak, 11 games. I think it's tied for their franchise's best record of 11 games win streak. This is his sixth All-Star appearance. He's got 19.9 points, 4.6, and 7.3 assists per game. Middleton on the Bucks, I feel like because he's on the Bucks, it's the best team in the NBA. He got a nod for this. The Bucks are 42-7, so you can't just have just one player from that team, I think. And he's only averaging 20.2 points per game, 5.9 rebounds, and 3.9 assists. And then to round it out, Russell Westbrook makes it for the eighth time. The Rockets are fifth in the West, 26.3 points, 8.1 rebounds, and 7.4 assists. So he's up there with his numbers, kind of close to averaging a triple-double. So this is a great All-Star selection for sure, but there are players who I think got snubbed. Biggest missing players for me are Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. These two are the only players over the last 35 years to average 27 or more points per game and not make the All-Star team. Devin Booker is averaging 27.1 points, 4 rebounds, and 6.4 assists, shooting the ball 51%. The reason I think maybe he didn't get the nod is because he's on the Phoenix Suns. They're 11th in the West. They're not that good. They don't raise a lot of eyebrows. He's probably not in the media a lot. And I think that might have to do with some of it. I mean, if you're being chosen as an all-star, it's an individual award. Whether or not your team is playing well or not, I feel like if you are playing at an elite level individually, you should at least get a nod. I mean, he is a player that should be making the all-star team consecutively. He's never made an all-star team. Devin Booker has never been an all-star, and to me, that is insane. Bradley Beal is another one, 28.8 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 6.3 assists. Career highs in points and assists. But again, the Wizards are in 10th, so I go back to my point. If maybe they're looking at the fact that their teams are playing as poorly as they are. Other players snubbed that people have been saying, I've been seeing a bunch of names thrown out. Kyrie Irving, I'm going to say no to that. He's missed most of the season. That makes no sense how he was snubbed. Towns, I think, yeah, that's true. If we go back to the point of if you're playing at an elite level individually, you should make it. He's averaging 27 points, 10.8 rebounds, and that's more rebounds and points than Adebayo. So he definitely probably should have got a nod as well, even though Adebayo's on the East. I'm just pointing out an example. Paul George, people throw that out as well. I say no because he's missed a good majority of the season as well. Even though he is an all-star player, everyone knows it, but he hasn't played enough this season. John Morant, maybe just because of how well the Grizzlies have been playing, but I don't think his numbers are up there yet. And DeRozan maybe as well. But then again, I don't know. It goes back and forth between who really leads the Spurs. Is it DeRozan or is it Aldridge? So I feel like maybe that's why DeRozan didn't get the nod. And so I go back to the two players that I think were snubbed the most, Booker and Beal. And who could they really replace? I think Beal should absolutely replace Middleton, no doubt, furthering my point that it shouldn't be based on team success if it's an individual nod, individual award, because his numbers are just a million times better than Middleton's. And I think maybe he could edge out Lowry as well, even though Lowry's on the defending champs. They're playing really well. But his numbers are nowhere near as good either. I mean, he has more assists, but nowhere near as many points. So I feel like Beal definitely got snubbed. He even said that he thinks it's disrespectful, and I agree. You should put the best players in the All-Star game, and not having Beal in, I think, doesn't make sense. Booker, on the other hand, is a little tougher because he's in the West. I think maybe you could put him over Donovan Mitchell. Mitchell does everything, though. He's very well-balanced, and I hate to say this, but he's on a Jazz team that's playing well, and I think that's what they look at. But he definitely could edge out Mitchell. Maybe he can edge out Chris Paul, but like I said, with Chris Paul, I feel like it's different. You kind of look at not necessarily Chris Paul's stats, but just his impact for the team and just how good they've been all year. So, tough to say. Those two maybe could replace the others, but maybe not. In this All-Star game, there are new rules being put into place. The first 3 quarters, each of them are going to be 12 minutes long. And then the score every single quarter for the first 3, it's going to start at 0-0. So you compete to win each quarter. Then for the fourth quarter, you add up all the points, the cumulative points from all 3 quarters, and whichever team is winning, you add 24 to that total. So say a team's winning cumulative points through 3 quarters, 195. Then the cap you got to reach is 124. So the team that's already winning has an advantage. They want to get to 124 quicker. The team that had 95, they got to score more points to win, obviously. But in this fourth quarter, the clock turns off, and the teams battle to get to the last number. And then adding 24, of course, is a nod to Kobe Bryant. And I think that's really cool for them to do. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Definitely I like the new rule changes just to maybe see if that makes it a little more competitive, because in years past, the All-Star Game has been a total joke. So maybe this is their efforts to really try and make it more competitive. And now switching gears, I had some predictions on the last podcast, so we'll tune in with that to see how well I did and kind of break down the biggest games of the last few days. I could tell you right now, though, I wasn't 100% on my guesses this go around, but we'll see how I did. Stay with us.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about some All-Stars that made the reserves. Their official list is out. I think the two biggest players getting snubbed, Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. We talked about how their stats are probably better than some of the people that got chosen, which brought the point to my attention that maybe they pick players based on team success, which doesn't really make sense because it's an All-Star selection. It's an individual nod. Individual award. So that part doesn't make sense to me. But moving forward now, we're going to talk about some of the bigger games that happened over the last few days that I made predictions on in the last podcast. So in the last podcast, we talked about the Jazz versus the Nuggets that would be playing on Thursday, this past Thursday. They were both basically tied third for the West. Utah at that time was on a 2-game skid. But the Nuggets had just lost one of their games as well. The Nuggets were going to be without Jamal Murray and Paul Millsap and Plumlee, like I mentioned before. And then I said that the Jazz, they had just lost to the Spurs, which I thought was surprising. They're on a 2-game skid. I thought this was going to be the game that kind of turned things around, especially since the Nuggets were shorthanded. But no, I was totally wrong. Definitely wrong. Utah led by 5 at halftime. But then they went completely cold in the third quarter. Got outscored 33-22. And honestly, they ended up losing 106-100. But honestly, I think it's a little unfair to judge me on this performance in terms of me guessing the probability of who's going to win. Because how on earth could I have ever predicted that Donovan Mitchell would score 4 points? He shot the ball 1 for 12. And scored 4 points. I would never expect that from Donovan Mitchell. I mean, players have off games. Don't get me wrong. I get that. But how do you only manage 4 points? That just doesn't make sense to me. He's a big star in this league. He gets an all-star nod, and he does that. Like, come on, man. Joe Ingles as well. Very disappointing. He had 8 points. He didn't shoot the ball very well either. And then Bogdanovich, when those two are slacking, he's usually the one that puts up like 30 and carries them over for the win. He only had 18 points in this game. Plus, Jokic was kind of a monster. He had a double-double in this one. 28 points with 10 assists. And then Michael Porter Jr., honestly, he's a double-double machine. It's easy for him. He's putting it together and playing really well as of lately. But still, I really thought that the Jazz would pull this one out. They've been the hotter team, and I really thought they'd have that extra motivation to kind of leapfrog the Nuggets to get into second place final or third place finally. But no, I was wrong. The Nuggets won this one. And I guess I got to look over the Nuggets a little more because I've been passing over them a lot lately and being wrong about it. The next game that we talked about was on Friday, the Rockets versus the Mavericks. I kind of got lucky with this one just because Luka Doncic didn't even play in this game. and I didn't see that coming. I didn't know that he was injured. But I kind of talked about how he was the X factor. So not having that is a huge blow for the Dallas Mavericks, of course. Although Porzingis, with his absence, played really well. I mean, he kind of had to because he'll be the main guy on offense. He scored 35 points and had 12 boards. So great double-double for him. He just didn't have enough help. Seth Curry had 16 points off the bench as the second highest scorer. And then the tandem in Houston went off. I talked about it last podcast how if those two players are rolling, it's any team going up against a team with James Harden and Russell Westbrook playing as well as they can, it's going to be tough to beat them. And James Harden was coming off a pretty low-scoring game and went off just like I said he would. He had 35 points, 16 boards, and 6 assists. So he was getting it done all over the floor. And then Westbrook also had 32 points, 6 rebounds, and 9 assists. So having those two in tandem like that, it's tough to beat a team like that. And then Gordon, who I said was, last podcast, was a better player coming off the bench than Seth Curry. He scored 17 compared to Curry's 16. So I was right. He scored one more point. It was pretty good prediction. Thank you. I put the margin of victory in this game at 7. And I did say that the Rockets would go over that margin. So the plus or minus was at 7, and I said they would go over. But not by much. I thought that it would be like an 8-point game or whatever. But the game ended up ending at 128-121, a 7-point win for the Houston Rockets. So I'm pretty good at setting a margin of victory. I'm 2 for 2 on those. So I thought that was pretty cool. Also, another game on Friday that we predicted, kind of broke down, kind of looked into, was the Pelicans and the Grizzlies. For me, this was a big game because we talked about how both teams have, potential excitement to it with John Morant versus Zion finally being seen, the first and the second pick. The rookie of the year campaign, even though, Zion Williamson only played 5 games in the NBA this season, but for whatever reason, people think in half a season he can steal that Rookie of the Year from John Morant, even though Jaw's been playing as well as he has all season long. But I thought it'd be a really cool matchup to see in this game. This game was not extremely competitive, though. There was only one lead change the entire game. The problem was that the Grizzlies just didn't have enough offense in this game at all. They just couldn't get it going. I stuck with the Pelicans because I've always been picking the Pelicans. And every prediction I've done that involves them, for whatever reason, I've been picking them. And they've just been doing me right. They beat the Celtics, which I thought was a huge victory for them. And I just like this team. I like what they bring to the table. And I want to see them get up into that playoff race in the West. I think it'll be very interesting to see. But they didn't do me wrong again. They did well for me. 139-111. The Pelicans destroyed the Grizzlies in this one. Valanciunas for the Grizzlies had 18 points and 8 rebounds with 4 blocks. So that's a pretty good performance from your center. But that was their highest scorer, so that's where the problem lies. John Morant did not play very well. He had 16 points, only 1 board and 3 assists, and he was minus 25. And I never really used that plus-minus statistic, but the reason I did is because he was minus 25, but his counterpart, Zion Williamson, was plus 25, which I thought was pretty cool to see. Zion put on a great performance, 24 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. Ingram had 20 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. Zoe had 19 points, 6 rebounds, 8 assists. And then Drew Holiday had 18 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists. So all the top players for the Pelicans were really performing, really clicking. And I think that this squad has a lot of potential, so it's going to be interesting to see how they really put it together. But they're clicking as of late. And then finally, we talked about a game on Saturday, the 76ers versus the Celtics. And every single time I predict on the Sixers, I'm usually wrong. But the reason being is because they're extremely inconsistent, like I said before. Some days they play like one of the top contenders in the East. And then other days they're terrible, one of the worst teams in the East. And it's funny because when I first started doing these podcasts, I was saying how I think the 76ers can be the best equipped team to combat the Milwaukee Bucks in the East. But now I can't even see that happening because how poorly they play in stretches. I just don't understand it. It does hurt the fact that they don't have Josh Richardson. They've been having Embiid have injuries a lot throughout the season already. In this particular game, I went with the Celtics because I just thought they had a little bit more to them, a little deeper roster. I was saying how the 76ers just didn't have enough in this game, and I was finally right in predicting against the Sixers. The Celtics beat them 116-95. Boston outscored them in every single quarter but the second, and they really dominated this game. Ben Simmons played pretty well, 23 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. But then their next highest scorer was Furkan Korkmaz with 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists. Embiid, he had 11 points in this game. But he had 5 boards too, which isn't great for him either. He shot the ball 1 for 11 from the field. 1 for 11. That means 9 points of his 11 total was from the line. I've never seen Joel Embiid play that bad, ever. But it worked out for me because I bet against him. Harris as well didn't play well either. He had 10 points and shot 4 for 12. But on the other side of the ball, Jaylen Brown went off. He had 32 points, 9 rebounds. Jason Tatum went off. He had a huge dunk over Al Horford. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It was nasty. He had 25 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. And then Marcus Smart had 16 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Kemba Walker did not play in this game. Had some knee soreness, so he was out for this one. But this was the Celtics' first win against the Sixers this year. They had lost the previous 2 matchups, so good for them. Coming up, we talk about some possible trade rumors surrounding the NBA as the trade deadline is upon us, so we'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah Quiroz. We just talked about some predictions I made on the past few games that were the biggest over the last few days. I did pretty well, 3 for 4 on my predictions. Some big games happening around the NBA with the Jazz versus Nuggets. Nuggets coming out victorious. We had the Dallas Mavericks versus the Houston Rockets, with the Rockets coming out on top, kind of getting back to their ways. The matchup between John Morant and Zion Williamson, which I thought was really cool to see. Grizzlies versus Pelicans, but the Pelicans blew them out, and Zion totally outplayed John Morant. And then finally, the Sixers versus Celtics. The Celtics had their first win over the Sixers this year, and Joel Embiid played really poorly, and the Celtics players did not. Jaylen Brown went off, played really well. Now we're going to kind of switch gears. There's a lot of trade rumors circling around, around the NBA right now, as the deadline is this coming Thursday. First news I'm going to talk about is that the Warriors are listening to trade rumors for trade offers for D'Angelo Russell. He's averaging 23.8 points per game, 3.7 rebounds, and 6.3 assists, career highs in points. And the best spot right now that's been consistently talked about is Minnesota. And I had said something about this before, thinking that the trade would be Russell for Towns. But no, Minnesota wants to pair these two together because of the relationship they have. They're great friends off the court, and this would finally make their biggest star in Towns happy, finally having his preferred pick-and-roll partner. So they really want to make this happen, but that would mean that Wiggins would probably be the person that goes to the Warriors, probably with some other pieces as well. And I'm not sure how I feel about that for the Golden State Warriors. I feel like maybe it could be a good match just because he's a decent wing player. He's a small forward, and they're going to need that, especially when Steph and Clay come back. But for me, I don't know. There's this stigma around Wiggins that he's soft, and I kind of see that as well. There just isn't enough from him. I don't think he does average 22.7 points, 5.2 boards, and 3.7 assists. So stats-wise, he looks good. But as a competitor, I haven't seen it on a consistent basis. And I don't know. The Minnesota Timberwolves have such a negative stigma to them right now to where I can't even look past that. And I feel like maybe that wouldn't be an ideal trade for the Warriors. But if they're listening to trade talks, it might happen. Who knows? The Warriors are also likely to get rid of Glenn Robinson III and Alec Burks. Burks is having a career high in every category. 15.8 points, 4.7 rebounds, and 3.2 assists. He's playing extremely well at Golden State. And then Glenn Robinson III, 12.7 points, which is well above his 5.8 career average. And he's got career highs in assists, rebounds, and assists as well with 4.7 and 1.7 respectively. So these two players, they've been playing really well. Glenn Robinson III has been starting for the Warriors, but Alec Burks coming off the bench, to me, he's been showing signs of being that next Andre Iguodala for this next dynasty that I think that the Warriors are trying to build. And so it's really interesting to me to see that they're trying to shop these two players when they could be really good assets off the bench when they're to full strength. I get that, teams are kind of circling the Warriors because of how poor they are, so they want to shop and make their team better, teams that are actually contenders this year. But I feel like some pieces you just have to keep, and I think that these two players can definitely be assets to the Warriors later down the road, especially when they get their star players back, because those two players coming off the bench, those are great numbers, and they're getting a lot of experience playing right now. I feel like it would be a bad move for them to get rid of them. Switching gears, Dwayne Dedmon wants to leave Sacramento Kings. He made it known before. He got put out of the rotation. He made a statement saying he wants to be traded. He got fined for that. They've kind of reconciled. He's been playing a lot more lately. Things are a little bit better, but I feel like he'll probably still move. One of the teams looking at him is Atlanta. He actually had his two best years of his career in Atlanta, so that would be a familiar place for him to go. Probably a good place for him to go as well. So it'd be interesting to see if that happens. Marcus Morris, I talked about him a couple podcasts ago. I feel like he could be a great asset to a contender in many different places. The Knicks want him to stay through the deadline and maybe shop him in the summer. Morris says he wants to stay for the long haul. But there are teams, big contenders, that really want him. One of them being the Clippers. And, having him as an extra player would boost any team, really, because he's having one of his best career years. He's averaging over 19 points a game. He's career high shooting the three at 43.8%. And he's just a force defensively. And he's just a really tough player overall. And to kind of add that three-point shooting and that grit from another player, I feel like would be a great fit for anyone, really, on any contender. So it'll be interesting to see if he moves. I feel like it would be better for him if he does. I'm interested to see why he wants to stay for the long haul at New York, because it doesn't really look like they're building anything there. So it probably would be in his better interest for him to move. Another player is Andre Drummond. We talked about it before when he was linked to Atlanta, but it probably won't happen. I mean, he's an unrestricted free agent in the summer, so if teams really wanted him, it'd be cheaper to just get him then, because you would pick him up, you would have him for half a season now, and then you would have to pay him big next year because he's close. I think he's close to getting a near max deal. So I feel like if teams really wanted Andre Drummond, they should just wait until the summer. Unrestricted free agency will be a lot cheaper for teams and just be a smarter move. I do believe he's connected to the Knicks at this point, though, which would really be interesting to see. I don't know how that would work out there. An interesting piece of news that I saw, Houston Rockets are shopping Capella. Capella's kind of been that third piece in their Big Three's projects there for the Rockets when it was CP3, James Harden, and Capella. Now it's Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and Capella. Capella's one of the better centers in the league, in my opinion, but there's a lot of upside to trading him. Atlanta is interested. There's talks about Drummond died, like I said. So Atlanta's looking to get Capella. They're linked to maybe Steven Adams, potentially. They're looking at Eastern Conference teams and looking for a three-way trades to get a center back and a wing player. But yeah, there's a lot of things about Capella that is just attractive for teams to want to get. Obviously, the numbers, he's 13.9 points and 13.8 rebounds per game. So that's an easy double-double right there. And the fact that his contract isn't as expensive, it could be a really good pickup for any team, really. Aaron Gordon's also being talked about as well. Season-ending injuries to Aminu and Jonathan Isaac really hurt the Orlando Magic. So, shopping away one of their better players in Aaron Gordon probably won't be in their greatest interest right now. So I think the only way that this trade happens is if they get big pieces back for Gordon, to stay in that playoff race. Because right now they're sitting in 8th in the Eastern Conference. They're half a game back from 7th Brooklyn Nets. They're 3.5 games up on the Bulls. So they want to make sure they stay in that playoff race. And if they get rid of Gordon right now, they got to make sure they have pieces that they can use right now to stay competitive. So I feel like Aaron Gordon probably won't move at all now, maybe in the summer. But trade rumors have been circling around him since he's pretty much been drafted there. So that's nothing new for him, nothing new for that organization. Aaron Gordon is kind of playing poorly this season. He's having a really poor year. I think he's averaging under 14 points per game, something like that. So his value in the trade market right now probably isn't as high as what it would have been in years past. So because of that and because their Magic want to stay competitive, I don't think he'll move. But yeah, maybe in the center, but maybe in the summer, but mostly because of injuries, the Magic aren't going to move him. And speaking of injuries, there's been a couple around the NBA, so we'll do a quick little injury update coming up next.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about some potential trade rumors that are happening since the trade deadline is coming up this coming Thursday. The Warriors are looking to listen to some trade offers for D'Angelo Russell. The Rockets are looking to get rid of Clint Capella, which I thought was very interesting. Other people like Marcus Morris might be on the move. So it'll be really fun to see. The trade deadline is always very interesting. I feel like there'll be last-minute jumps here and there. Kind of just shake things up. I think it's a little fun way to shake things up for the NBA. But now we're going to switch gears. There's a good amount of injuries that are happening around the NBA right now that I kind of want to touch on. Starting with Trae Young. He suffered a right ankle sprain late in the third quarter in his game against the Mavericks on Saturday. He actually wanted to keep playing this game, but when your star player goes down like that and has any type of injury, you shut him down. I mean, you just want to wrap him up and make sure he doesn't hurt himself further. So that's exactly what they did. He sprained the same ankle before earlier this season, in which point he only missed 2 games, so it wasn't that serious. So hopefully it's the same thing, but he said that he couldn't tell really what the severity of the injury was. But it comes at an unfortunate time. He was playing really well. He did also just get his career high in assists the other night at 18 assists. And it's really tough blow for the Atlanta Hawks because they're just such a poor team. They're 13-37, last in the East. So to lose your star player is really unfortunate. And that game against the Mavericks was supposed to be, the sophomore battle between Trae Young and Luka Doncic, which would have been a lot of fun to watch. Those two players go, head to head. But the problem was not the fact that Trae Young went out in the third quarter, but because Luka didn't play at all. Luka's out too with a sprained ankle. He's expected to come back February 12th, and in similar fashion, it's really unfortunate for the Dallas Mavericks because, he's such a good player. I mean, I say it, I feel like, every single podcast. He's one of the best players in the NBA. He's obviously an all-star starter. He's probably second in the MVP race, and he's the main reason why the Dallas Mavericks are as good as they are. They're 30-19. They're 6th in the West. They're only a game back from 5th, 2 games back from 4th, and they're a force in the Western Conference, I think. But to not have him for an extended period of time is unfortunate. But when he comes back and put him in, because I feel like him and Porzingis haven't really played together that much, because Luka was hurt early on in the year, and then Porzingis got hurt right when he got back, and then now that Porzingis got back, Luka's hurt now. So these two players have really not played together that much, and I think it would be a lot more beneficial for the Mavericks to get them both healthy, playing together, leading into playoffs. I feel like they could be a very dangerous team. Another star player that's out is Kyrie Irving. He sprained his knee against the Wizards, and he was coming off a historic game too, so it's really unfortunate timing for him. He's the first player to drop 50-plus points on 80% or better shooting in the last 25 years, and he's only one of 7 players to do that. So great performance from him, super efficient. I mean, who scores 50 points and shoots the ball 80%? That's crazy. Kyrie has already missed 28 games this year. That's a career high for him, a career high in a bad way. They expect him back February 10th, so not that long. But they're only half a game up on the Magic right now. They're sitting in 7th, and they don't want to drop to that 8th seed. I thought it was really funny. I saw a quote from Spencer Dinwiddie saying that no one wants to be that 8th seed because they don't want to go up against the Bucks and Giannis because he's just a crazy force, obviously. And he even said, "Don't put me on Giannis. I can't guard him." And I think that's just hilarious because no one really can. It's really hard to limit what Giannis Antetokounmpo does. So I think that's spot on. And since they're barely sitting in 7th right now, they're not playing that well. They're going to want to keep a momentum going, try and push forward, push higher into the rankings right now for the Eastern Conference. And without Kyrie Irving, it's just that much harder to do. Chicago Bulls, they've really caught the injury bug. Chris Dunn, he's at game time decision, so he's not fully injured. Markkanen, though, he has a pelvis injury. He's out until February 22nd. Wendell Carter Jr., he's out till February 6th with an ankle injury. Otto Porter Jr. has a foot injury and will be out until February 11th. So they have a lot of bad things going for them right now. They're 3.5 games back from the Magic, so they could potentially make that playoff potential push, but they just don't have their full squad. And when they have that many injuries, You leave Zach LaVine by himself, got Kobe White, but poor guy, LaVine just has to carry that team to be competitive at all. But once they get all those players back, they could be a scrappy team in the East, maybe squeeze into the 8th seed. But with all these injuries, it's going to be tough for them to do. And the same kind of things happening for the Nuggets. We talked about it earlier. Jamal Murray is out and so is Michael Porter Jr., both with ankle injuries. But apparently they've both been moved to game-time decisions, so Murray might be back soon. As well as Paul Millsap, who's also on a game-time decision. He has a knee injury. He's missed a few games. And then Plumlee as well. He's missed a lot of games too with a foot injury. He will be out till February 15th, so they won't get him back anytime soon. It's a little unfortunate for the Nuggets, but they've still stayed competitive, still stayed above the Jazz, and still stayed in third. So they've got a lot of positives going for them, and I think Michael Porter Jr. playing as well as he is definitely a welcome sign as well. That guy can be a walking double-double, and the fact that they got him coming off the bench is just that much sweeter. There's like I said, they're still third with a game and a half up on the slipping Jazz. And now moving forward, T.J. Warren, he just got a concussion, and he'll be out February 5th. But I feel like it would probably be longer than that, just because I know how the concussion protocol works. They really want to make sure that he's got no symptoms, make sure he's like 100% good. They don't mess around with concussion injuries because head injuries, all the new information they've got on those, and all the research, the data, they're being extremely cautious with head injuries. So it might be longer than that, but we'll see how that goes. He collided with Sabonis, kind of got shaken up. He was on the floor for a while, but he stayed in the game. And then he fell under the basket, and it kind of looked like he hit his head on the floor. And so they ruled him having a concussion after taking him to the hospital. And apparently he has a history with some head injuries. In 2016, he was out for a month with a concussion. And back then, the Suns called it a minor head injury because he was on the Phoenix Suns before. And then the next season after that, he ended up getting stitches for a cut after a collision. But he didn't have a concussion this time, just had to get stitches on his head. But he's been very good this season for the Pacers. And they're in 5th right now, just a half a game over the Sixers. So to keep that spot, they're definitely going to need T.J. Warren back as soon as possible. But like I said, with head injuries, they got to make sure he's 100% good because they don't want to mess around with that at all. R.J. Barrett, he's got an ankle injury. He'll be out until February 7th on the Knicks team that is still pretty poor. They're not last in the East, which a lot of people thought they would be. But they're close to the bottom. They're third from last, above the Cavs now. But yeah, not having R.J. Barrett, definitely a huge blow for them. He'll be back soon, though, so no big worries. Andre Roberson, he had a knee injury a year ago. He could be coming back this month, February 21st. And to add that onto an OKC team that's already been competitive, if Roberson can get back to the way he used to be as a defensive force, that could be a huge, huge plus for the Thunder and just make them that much better, which is insane to me because I didn't even think they were going to be as competitive as they are. And now to get Roberson back, he's not a great shooter. He's not going to get you a whole bunch of points, but he's a really good defender. So if he can get back to how he used to play, that'll be a very big added bonus for the Thunder for sure. Josh Richardson, we talked about, he's injured for the Sixers. He's still out, but he's maybe back this week, and it would be a welcome sign for the Sixers because they need him. With as inconsistent as they are, he'll be a big added bonus for them on offense and defense. Portland could get Nurkic back at a time that they're catching fire. I mean, he's coming back sometime this month, I think, and that would be a great sign for the Blazers, who have already been winning games without him. But to add Nurkic into that lineup will really just help them that much more. Marvin Bagley of the Sacramento Kings re-aggravated a foot injury he had that made him miss a few games earlier in the year. He's out till February 20th when the Kings are already playing pretty poorly, so to have him go down is really unfortunate for them to see. They're 3-7 in their last 10, so they've really been struggling as of late. Toronto, they're getting Powell back on the 21st, supposedly. That's the expected date back. And we already talked about it. The Toronto Raptors are on fire as of late, and to add back Powell, they're just going to be that much better. I mean, I definitely didn't expect the defending champs to be as good as they are. Second in the East right now. And they were missing most of their best players for a long time. So add him back onto this Toronto team that has Siakam back, has Gasol back. They're pretty much full strength. Van Vliet's healthy again. It's a dangerous team. Spoiler alert, Toronto is on my list for who's hot, who's not. But what place did they get? We do who's hot and who's hot coming up next.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just gave you an injury update. Some big names out for a week, couple weeks, what have you. Kyrie Irving's injured, Trae Young's injured, Luka Doncic is hurt. Some other big names as well. But some players coming back, like Powell for the Toronto Raptors, who are extremely hot as of late, kind of segueing into my section of who's hot, who's not. We're going to start with who's hot. Coming in at number 5 are the Boston Celtics. They're 6-4 in their last 10 games. They're on a 3-game win streak, and they just beat the Heat and the Sixers in a 3-game span. And those are both really big forces in the East, so definitely impressive wins for sure, especially since the Heat have been as competitive as they are. I feel like they've kind of been leapfrogging each other all year in terms of who's ahead of who. And then the Sixers, like I mentioned, they can be a really good competitor in the Eastern Conference on a good day. Celtics caught them on a bad day, gave them a beatdown. But nevertheless, that's a really big performance, really big win, as it's their first time beating the Sixers this year. And then they beat the Lakers and they beat the Grizzlies, kind of one after another, and so those are two big Western Conference teams that they beat as well. Grizzlies, you can make the case that, no, they're not really a big team, but they've been hot as of late. They've been one of the better teams in the West the last month and a half. And then the Lakers are the first in first place in the West, so to beat them is impressive as well. The problem with the Celtics, though, is that they just keep getting these little injuries. Kemba Walker keeps missing games just from, small injuries here and there. Cantor as well has been out. Jalen and Marcus Smart. But I think what makes them so good is the fact that they're just so deep. I mean, you still have players like Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. So they have a really deep roster, and even when they have these injuries, they're still competitive. And they've been playing really well as of late. So they've made my list for who's hot at number 5. And then coming in at number 4 is the Clippers, who are 7-3 in their last 10. They're second in the West right now, 3.5 back from the Lakers, of course. But what baffles me about the Clippers is the fact that they are very inconsistent as well. Even though they're second in the West right now, games like the game they played against the Kings the other day, they lost to the Kings 124-103. But I don't understand it, because then they beat teams like the Pelicans, they beat the Heat, the Mavericks. So I'm really not sure about them, but they're doing well as of right now. And the fact that everyone is healthy on their team, probably for the first time all year, is definitely a good sign for them when they're playing as well as they are, getting all their stars back. They can really start building that momentum, really building that chemistry, leading into the playoffs, and no one should sleep on the Clippers. They're probably one of the best teams in the NBA on their best day, and if they start getting that rhythm, they're going to be dangerous. So Clippers come in at number 4. Number 3, I got to give it to the Blazers. They're 7-3 in their last 10 games. They're on a 4-game win streak. This is their second best win streak right now. They've beaten good teams like the Lakers, and Damian Lillard has just been playing absolutely out of his mind. And when your star player is playing that well, your team's going to play really well as well. So, and the fact that they're getting Nurkic back as well. So, they've got a lot of things going for them. They're winning a lot of big games that they need to win. They're getting back into that playoff hunt. They're, in 9th place right now. They're circling around the Grizzlies. They're only a game and a half back. So, they're making a push to be back in that race. And I'm not sure how long this hot streak for Damian Lillard is going to last, but they'll take as much as they can get from him. And even when he cools off, they got players like Melo who can bring the offensive load, or even CJ McCollum too. And we saw Whiteside scoring 30 points the other day, so he obviously can do it as well. So this team's got a lot of upside to them, and I feel like now that they're starting to make it a push to get back in the playoffs, they'll stay around there for the rest of the year. Coming in at number 2 is the Milwaukee Bucks, of course. They're 9-1 in their last 10. They are beating teams by a margin. They're beating teams by a margin of 12.4 points. They're 42-7, and that's really the only stat I need to tell you. But the weird part was, for me, is that they lost to the Nuggets, who didn't have Murray, didn't have Plumlee, didn't have Millsap. But the problem was that on that Nuggets team, every single player that played was in double-figure scoring. Michael Porter Jr. with a double-double again. And then Giannis, Middleton, Bledsoe, they all played really well, but they just had no help in this game whatsoever. But them dropping one game is never going to be a worry at all. Like I said, their record's 42-7, and they're just destroying teams. They're not even just beating teams, they're destroying teams. I mean, a margin of victory of 12.4. Positive 12.4. That's crazy. I mean, they're the team to beat for sure. And it's crazy that the Nuggets beat them, but other than that, it's been tough to knock these guys off. So they're number 2. And the number 1 are the Raptors. 11-game win streak. That ties their team best. Terrence Davis, to put things in perspective, he's a rookie. He had a career-high game of 31 points. He kind of got passed over in the Rising Star game. And then he went out and scored 31 points. Kind of maybe a statement game for him. But the biggest reason why the Raptors are playing as well as they are is that they're healthy again. They got Pascal Siakam, their most improved player from last year, had an MVP caliber start to the season and then got injured. So that hurt. Van Vliet missed a good amount of games. He's another player that really showed up in the playoffs last season and just started going off, and he's continued that this year. Marc Gasol, he's back from injury, and so this team's really just clicking. And for them to win 11 games in a row, jump all the way back to second in the East, I didn't expect that, especially when Kawhi left. So good on them to stay competitive. So they're number 1 on my list. A couple of honorable mentions. The Pacers, Thunder, and Grizzlies are all 7-3 in their last 10. So they've been playing pretty well. The Pelicans are 6-4 in their last 10. But the reason why I put them in this is because Zion's looking really good. He's played 5 games, and he's averaging 19.2 points, 7.8 rebounds per game on 62% shooting. So he's played really well on a team that's already making strides to be one of the better teams in the West. So to add him, they're just going to get that much better in my opinion. Switching over to who's not hot, coming in at number 5, are the Orlando Magic, who are on a 5-game losing streak. They're 3-7 in their last 10. Like I said before, Aaron Gordon's having a disappointing year, and so that hurts them tremendously. Injuries to Jonathan Isaac and Aminu, both probably being out for the year, is a huge blow to them. They also had just a rough schedule as well. That 5-game losing streak that I mentioned, those 5 teams that they lost to were the Thunder, the Celtics, the Clippers, and they lost to the Heat twice. So it's not, in no way is that an easy schedule at all. But unfortunately for them, that means they make the Who's Not Hot list. Coming in at number 4, Charlotte Hornets. They're 1-9 in their last 10. They're on a 2-game losing streak. But they had games on their schedule there where they definitely could have pulled out wins. They could have beaten the Suns. They could have beaten the Magic, the Knicks, the Wizards, but they lost all those games. And I'm not sure why, because even though they don't have the highest quality players, they do have some good pieces, like Devontae Graham. He's a really good player. Terry Rozier, he's a great player as well. Miles Bridges, pretty decent. But I feel like they probably just don't have enough quality to be competitive enough. And so they've really fallen down in the Eastern Conference and not one of the better teams by a long shot. They're barely above the Knicks right now, so that kind of puts it in perspective how good they are. So they're number 4. Coming in at number 3 is the Golden State Warriors. They're 2-8 in their last 10. But they did just beat the Cavs, so it's pretty cool because it's an interesting game to see between those two teams after squaring off for 4 straight finals. To still see that the Warriors are beating them is just a pleasure to me. Side note, big pleasure. But yeah, they've been really poor, and they just got an injury update that Steph will not play in the month of February. He'll get reevaluated March 1st, so that kind of sucks for them. And they're looking to be sellers in the trade deadline this season, like I talked about. Potentially moving D'Angelo Russell, potentially moving Alec Burks and Glenn Robinson III. But honestly, for them, it doesn't even matter. I feel like the season's just a wash, and they'll be back to it and be back competitive next year. Coming in at number 2, Cleveland Cavaliers, who are 1-9 in their last 10. They're on a 3-game losing streak, including to the Warriors. Just had to say that again. They had games within this last 10 where they could have won games. They were up against the Bulls, the Knicks, the Wizards, the Bulls again, and the Pistons. So plenty of opportunities for them to grab a win. But other than Kevin Love, they really don't have any star power. Colin Sexton's a pretty decent player, but they just don't have enough to put together offensively. And I feel like they're really poor defensively as well. The Warriors poured on a bunch of three-pointers the other night. So that just kind of puts into perspective just how bad their defense is. So it's been tough for them. They've really fallen down in the Eastern Conference standings. They're second to last right now, so that's unfortunate for them. And then number 1 on who's not hot, looking back at who was hot, number 1 was the Toronto Raptors on an 11-game win streak. But in comparison to the number 1 who's not hot are the Timberwolves because they're on an 11-game losing streak. They are so bad. I just don't even understand it. They blew that big game against the Kings that we talked about last podcast. They were up by 17 with, I think, 2.5 left to go or something like that, something crazy like that. Blew that game. That was probably their best chance to get a win because they've had a pretty tough schedule as of late. They had the Clippers, the Kings, where they choked, the Thunder, the Rockets, and their last 4. And even farther back, looking back farther than those 4 games, they were against all playoff teams. So it's definitely tough to be a Timberwolves fan right now, I'm sure. But they are looking to get better, like I talked about. They're going to be in that trade market. They're looking to get D'Angelo Russell. So maybe they're going to start moving pieces around to get better. But I feel like for this season, there's really no chance for them to really turn things around. They're second to last in the West with a record of 15-33. But yeah, an 11-game losing streak. They need to win bad, and they need to win soon. Some honorable mentions for who's not hot. Brooklyn Nets, the Kings are both 3-7 in their last 10 games. And then the Jazz, I'm going to throw it out there just because they're on a 4-game losing streak. But they're still close to the top of the West, so not really too worried about that. And then the Chicago Bulls are on a 3-game losing streak and 4-6 in their last 10 games. And they've been struggling. Like I said, they have a whole bunch of injuries, so I don't see that situation getting better for them anytime soon. So that's going to do it for Who's Hot or Not, and that's going to do it for this podcast. So thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review, because that really helps us out. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I would greatly appreciate that. I'm Isiah Quiroz. Thank you, and see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.